Every day we get here on this show and somebody in the chat brings up Joel. It's impossible not to. He is obviously the focal point of the last decade of Sixers basketball, but you will hear a lot about his failures, his coming up short, his lack of playoff success, and ultimately how it ties back to his own individual legacy. But is he the most to blame for the Sixers' lack of playoff success over the last decade? We'll get into that in today's show. I'm joined by Rich Hoffman once again on the PHLY Sixers show, brought to you as always by Rothman Orthopedics. How you doing, Rich?
Derek, it's Wednesday. It's hump day.
It is Wednesday.
And we're going to embrace debate a little bit here.
Little bit of debate. You know, I'm actually curious to the list that we came up with, how different our lists are. But we're just going to go through a bunch of things, both overrated and underrated, on why the Sixers haven't gotten as far as you would expect. You know, I guess sort of just to lay it out, which just will probably reveal some of my leanings. One of my main thoughts on basketball is that stars tend to get, like when people are frustrated, stars take a brunt of that criticism, deserved or not. You know, I think this probably stems well before Joel Embiid. This probably goes back to the Allen Iverson era, where if they fail to build a proper team around them with the talent necessary to compete, you end up getting frustrated at the one person that's actually making your franchise relevant and overlooking the failures of everyone around them. Now, that doesn't mean that who we talk about is blameless. Like if I say somebody is, is an because we're going overrated, underrated on causes. If I say this cause is an overrated, it's overrated by the fan base or overrated by the media.
That's not saying
it's not saying they're not
real.
Part of the blame. It doesn't mean that they didn't come up small. It just means they are talked about a little bit too much. And likewise, if somebody is underrated as a cause of why they came up short, it doesn't mean that they are necessarily the primary cause or even a secondary cause. It just means that they're kind of skating by, not necessarily drawing the criticism maybe they deserve. That is sort of how we are framing it. So, I think this is, again, this might be a little bit of a down podcast, but we spend so much and people spend so much debating Joel Embiid's legacy that I think it's a conversation worth having. And a lot of times when people have this conversation that Rich and I are going to have every day, but they simplify it down to, oh, he's a loser, or oh, he came up small. And it really feels like it falls on the shoulders of one person. And I think it's worthwhile to have a deeper inspection of everyone in the organization over the last decade and their role in getting us to this point. Because I really do feel like, there is one unforgivable sin in basketball, and that is having an MVP caliber player and failing to do what is necessary to build an actual championship contender around them. Again, this is something that you could go back to. I talked about before Joel Embiid ever got here. It's one of the things that always frustrated me about the Allen Iverson era. And I just look at it, and obviously Joel Embiid's health is, we all know about the uncertainty and about whether or not he can get through a season, much less a playoff run. There's that concern that you are at the stage where you at least have to consider the fact that they may have wasted the prime of one of the most talented players to ever come through this organization. And it frustrates the ever-living heck out of me.
How awesome would it be if Joe just came back and was sick this year? Like,
it would be truly one of the greatest stories we've ever had.
Like just after saving long-form journalism with that article by opening up to that ESPN writer, I'm blanking on his name, but that was... I mean, by the way, were you on the pod for the day when that dropped, or was that Kyle and Devon?
I was out in Arizona on vacation.
Man, what a banger that was.
It really was.
Man.
No, I mean, that was, and honestly, I said this before, I give Joe a lot of credit for even doing it in the first place. Because when you sign up for one of those, like not everything's going to be, not always everything is going to reflect me in a positive light.
No.
Like when you talk about people that have known you over the course of a decade, especially Joe, like he knows his flaws. He might not have improved on all of them, but he knows his flaws. He knows that there's going to be some things come out that don't paint him in a positive light.
He doesn't know all of his flaws.
Not all of his flaws. Nobody does.
Which is part of the article.
Certainly elite athletes don't. But, I think most PR nowadays would say like, our main goal is to make sure that nothing negative comes out.
Yes.
Not to help you connect with the fan base that has devoted so much time to you. And I think that article, even though it exposed some of his flaws, for a lot of people, it helped them connect to him in ways that they hadn't before.
There there's so much less of that now. That was an old school magazine profile where you let the writer in and you're honest with that writer, and you let that writer come to his or her own conclusions while also talking to a bunch of people in your orbit. The modern day athlete does not need that article. They go to the Players Tribune.
Well, they don't think they need that article. I would argue that they do need that.
Oh, yeah.
But they certainly don't think they need
That's a better way to put it. Yeah. They don't think they need it. And what you get is just sanitized garbage. And I mean, a lot of times the least reliable narrator is actually yourself, because you're going to paper over all of the warts and you're not going to show them. I think
I sit up here.
Those Netflix documentaries, a lot of those sports documentaries, complete garbage.
Yeah.
Just garbage.
I sit up here. I think I have charisma. Obviously, I'm the least reliable narrator in that regard, because all of you know that I don't. The person actually speaking cannot reliably narrate themselves 100%.
I mean, how many hours of podcasting have you done?
So many,
over the past
and I still
years?
Suck at it so badly.
I think we could get you a sizzle reel where you have some charisma.
If you took the last decade of podcasting, I probably have a couple of funny moments. That's true. That's true.
But anyway, credit to him, because he doesn't look great in a lot of that article, and some of it you feel also very sympathetic for him at the same time. But yeah, I mean, for him to open up to that writer and just get like a very real portrait of everything that's going on with him I think it's kind of shocking, frankly, that he is the one who has done that, because he's somebody who, even though, we know him a little bit, we've covered him for a long time, I don't feel like I know the real him. I think some of his teammates would say they don't always know the real him. Well, now I feel like I do a little bit because of that article. So credit to him for opening up. Yeah, that was what a banger too. And that writer, great job with that article.
No, it really was. All right, so I guess we'll sort of approach this the same way we did yesterday's show. We'll just start going through our lists. Rich, we will let you go first here. What is your number one most overrated reason that the Sixers have not won a championship, or at least contended for a championship in the last decade?
Kawhi Leonard shot.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the way that got talked about for years, it was like, by the way, if he doesn't make that shot, they still have to play an overtime period on the road. Now if you care about Uncle Mo and momentum, they would have, that Toronto Raptors team would have been completely dejected going back to the huddle and playing in that overtime. But the big one, they would have had to beat the Milwaukee Bucks on the road.
Yes.
And Toronto in that series, if you remember, Toronto in the Sixers series, Fred VanVleet was a disaster. And a lot of that didn't have anything to do with the Sixers. He was just missing shot after shot. In the middle of that Milwaukee series, Fred VanVleet turned into the Human Torch. He was on fire, man. So the automatic, oh my gosh, if Kawhi's shot doesn't go in, they would have won a title. Maybe they would have. I mean, Golden State was a wounded Golden State team in the finals with Kevin Durant coming back. Maybe you don't get the old Drake memes of after KD got injured. Oh no, because the Sixers wouldn't have had that. Maybe it was Michael Rubin or something like that on the sidelines. Okay, I'm just getting completely off topic now. Anyway, they would have had to do a lot more, and it wasn't the difference between just winning the championship and losing the championship.
Yeah. No, there was still a lot of work to be done in that. And it's devastating because you felt like that was one of the most talented teams that they had. Certainly, I think that was the best defensive unit that they had in terms of having a diverse set of players who could theoretically attack you. That was probably the most that they had. But it was very obvious two things. First of all, they didn't really know how to play alongside of each other, like at all. Like Jimmy spent most of the second half of that regular season pretty much standing in a corner and refusing to shoot.
It was unbelievable.
Then
he didn't shoot a three for like the whole month of March.
No, it was almost like a protest non-shooting. Although we've seen that now from Jimmy for a couple of.
He still does that with Miami, and then he's the best player in the playoffs.
Yep. And he'll shoot 4 or 5 threes a game too. It's wild.
The all-time playoff riser, Jimmy Butler.
And then you've spent the playoffs with Ben Simmons standing in the dunker spot. Jimmy still didn't really feel like he knew how to play off of Joel at a high level, and Joel was banged up in the playoffs. That playoff offense, especially against the Raptors, was, I think, a lot more painful to watch than maybe some people remember. I think they would have run into some problems.
It was a weird series. 4 absolute blowouts. Now, the Sixers got a couple of them. And look, when that team was going good, they had the talent to completely smoke people at home, but they got their butts kicked a couple times in Toronto.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, they did. And it's also tough because Joel was so banged up in that series, which is probably going to be brought up at some point. But he had the stomach bug at one point, and I think he was battling through knee problems. So he was pretty banged up throughout the course of that series. Clearly wasn't 100%. And like you mentioned in yesterday's show, he just wasn't fully evolved offensively yet. Like he was nowhere near the 2021, 22, 23 version of himself and just didn't know how to attack like that. And plus they were going up against an incredible defensive squad with the Raptors as well. But yeah, you had to win game 7 in overtime still, even if Kawhi misses that shot. You had to go and win a conference finals against a tough opponent. You had to then win the finals. Like you had a lot of steps to still get to in order to actually get to where you wanted to go. It's a devastating outcome.
Sure.
It's probably the best series that they've played. You can make an argument for Boston in 23, at least for the first 6 games of that series, especially the first 5 3/4 games of that series was maybe their best played. But you could also make an argument that Toronto, they played a championship caliber team right down to the wire. So because of that, it's frustrating. It could have been a real statement win. It could have been a real, era defining win.
Sure.
Not necessarily a title. So I agree with you. Like just because of the sheer amount of work they still had in front of them, I think that can be overrated.
And also, as you mentioned too, the uneven nature of that team. I mean, when you looked at the bench on that team, Mike Scott, James Ennis,
not perfect.
The backup centers, we might get to that in a little bit. So it was a little bit of a top heavy team, and that was a weird series where they scored a couple of super impressive blowout victories. I mean, if you look at that series, there were 3 close games. Game 2, Game 4, Game 7. Unfortunately, the Sixers went 1 and 2. That's the difference between advancing and not. But it was a little bit of a weird series. And really, the main reason I say it's overrated is the amount of work that they had to do. It's just like we don't know. They could have gotten their butts kicked, but that was a very good Giannis and Milwaukee team. And frankly, Toronto in the middle of that series they caught fire. I mean, I think they won an overtime game in Game 3 too. Toronto very close to losing that series as well. So that's all.
Agreed. All right. So I guess for my number 1 overrated, I'm going to go with coaching. I think this is something. Now, look, I'm going to say this with a caveat that the 2021 performance against the Hawks has to be called out. That coaching was a monumentally important factor in that series loss.
Let's talk about that 2021 series real quick before you get to everything else. What was the big issue? Was it the Dwight Howard minutes with Ben?
Ben, that was a disaster. And that was a disaster that we called out beforehand. Like, you cannot play those two together. And by the way, shame on Daryl for putting Dwight on that team, but we can get to that as well. And
also not trading for anybody at the deadline, and Doc for not experimenting at all during the regular season. Yeah.
I mean, Danny on Trey was just, so and that was another one where like beforehand, you're going like first possession, you're like, what are you doing? There's no way this is going to work.
Game 1 with that. That was so bad.
Not having any answer.
Ben Simmons, the one thing he was good at that point was guarding smaller players, man.
Not having any answer for Kevin Huerter of all people.
Yeah.
And like Atlanta was just able to get the switch on to Seth whenever they wanted. Just whenever they won, they had no answer for it. That was the one series that I think coaching was a huge, huge, huge factor in that.
That's fair.
Outside of that, the other playoff exits, I think coaching is overstated as a reason.
Yeah, I agree.
I think for the most part, and this is something that Rich and I have been on the same page with for a long time and made the argument for. And people used to actually call us Doc apologists because we didn't grill him as much. And clearly, if you've listened to the show, we don't have a lot of great feelings, strong, warm, fuzzy feelings for Doc Rivers.
No.
And we've had some pretty public battles with him as well.
And we had warm and fuzzy feelings for Brett Brown. I feel like the fact that we were fair to Doc Rivers and we generally viewed him in that same regard, especially when we're talking about the 22 and 23 playoff losses, where I do not think he was the guy who was primarily responsible. I feel like we're pretty consistent.
Yeah. And what's backing that is that I think coaches, for the most part, get they get a lot of the criticism because they are the easiest to blame. They're the most visible to blame. You can blame them with a lot of nebulous, the rotations are bad or stuff like that, that sounds great, but doesn't actually have a whole lot of details behind it. And also, they're just the easiest to change. If you are frustrated at your stars, it's hard to get new stars. If you don't have enough resources to go out and add talent, it's tough to add talent. You can always hit the change the coach button. And you can do that with minimal, all it really impacts is Josh Harris and his bottom line. If you have to eat a contract for a little bit. Other than that, you can change coaches. It's a real easy change to make. Because of that, I think a lot of teams like to make that change, to pull that lever when they are stuck. And I think a lot of fans push for that. but I think a lot of times, unless you are one of the 5 worst coaches in the league, I do think we tend to overstate. Like, we can sit here and nitpick individual plays and individual decisions. Every coach makes those mistakes. Every coach makes then great calls that you don't see or that get overlooked. I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact. Again, going back to what we said at the top of the show, I'm saying the impact is overstated quite a bit. That being said, the Hawks series was an abomination, and he deserves every bit of blame for that.
That was the worst series, I think. If you want to say Brett's worst series, I think that's 2018 against the Celtics. Now, that whole team, I don't think was really ready for that.
No, and I think the Celtics, even though the only reason I think the Celtics were viewed as like a comparable team is because they were so young. I mean, the Sixers were young too, but the Celtics were super young.
They had Horford. They had some older. I mean, they had Tatum too. So I thought Brad Stevens obviously got the better of Brett in that series. But like, look, Ben Simmons was clearly not ready. Not like he ever was going to be ready, but he definitely was not ready at that point. And that Sixers team, they had some weaknesses. You could pick it. They were very reliant on JJ and Bellinelli and all of those guys. Okay. You mentioned Doc though. Doc in 22. Against the Heat, that team did not have a lot of continuity. We might talk about that in a little bit as well. I mean, that's the classic James Harden. The ball never found me. It's like, man, I'm not getting on Doc Rivers for that.
Yeah,
like, come on, man. And
I still can't believe he said that. You're the point guard. What do you mean it never found you?
Yeah,
go get the ball.
Well, and then I think in 23, one of their best teams when they were able to load up with depth. Now, like, was PJ Tucker as good as we thought he was going to be? No, he was cooked. Even though he did have that good moment where he got the rebound and the N1 at the end of Game 4 of that Celtics series, but there was more depth on that team. It wasn't perfect, right? You could pick at some of those players, and I think the Celtics were a more well-rounded team. But yeah, I mean, after that series is over and Doc Rivers gets fired, it's more a part of like, look, you got 3 shots at this. I don't really think you were primarily at fault for the last 2 playoff losses, but now you change coaches, and it's the easiest thing to do. And I don't think, is it a little bit unfair? You could make that point. I don't think fair has anything to do with it. I think you get a certain number of shots, and then it's easy. Let's see if a new voice can kind of take us over the top. But no, that Game 7 no-show, was that Doc Rivers' fault? No.
Did he not, get on a pedestal and yell loud enough in the locker room before the game? Like, they're professionals.
Come on, guys. So yeah, we have been pretty consistent on this, that we don't think the coaching is, I mean, look, it can make a little bit of a difference. Obviously Nick Nurse in the Knicks here, like, that's fine. Like, I thought he actually coached a pretty good series in that one, took the Sixers as far as they could, just couldn't get over the top. Joel was hurt. Jalen Brunson played awesome, all of that stuff. So yeah, I just don't think the coaching, it matters, but in terms of it being overrated, it's something we hear about all the time. And I think it's a little much.
Not insignificant, just overstated and overrated. That's impact. Yeah.
Okay.
Agree with you 100%. All right, you want to get to some of our friends here before we get to the rest of our list? I feel like this is going to end up being a quite a long show as well. I mean, we're going to try not to do an hour and a half like we did last show, but I'm guessing overtime is probably in our future.
I think that's true. And by the way, Joaquin made a good point too. PJ embarrassing them with his offensive rebounding when he was on the Heat as well. Again, I'm not killing Doc Rivers for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fortunately, we didn't get that in the future years. But anyway, let's go talk to some of our friends.
By the way, wait. I'm sorry. I'm trying
so hard to get to an ad break here, Rich.
I'm going off topic, but PJ Tucker, man, he cracks me. I will never forget Game 1 against Boston when Harden has that amazing game and Joel is out with the injury. And B-Ball Paul actually, like, a very nice effort, made some key plays down the stretch or whatever. There was video of PJ Tucker just going in on B-Ball Paul, just cursing him out like you've never seen. And Doc, after the game, it's like one of the funniest Doc things ever. It's like, it was a little much, I got to be honest.
Doc had his funny moments for sure. Nothing beats Brooklyn, which I'm not even sure if we can repeat on air right now. No. But nothing beats Brooklyn. But Doc definitely had his funny moments.
No, that was so funny where he was like, "Yes, does PJ Tucker provide a sense of leadership?" Yes. He's like, "Was that a little over the top on ball read?" Yeah.
No, he was great. All right, can we please get to an ad break?
All right, let's talk to our friends. Let's do it.
Let's get to an ad break. All right, first up, we want to tell you about Cherry Hill Mitsubishi. Here's a fact that shocked me. Mitsubishi Motors is #1 in customer satisfaction with dealer services among mainstream brands and SUV owners. And that's not me or Rich saying it either. That is JD Power. If you're looking for the most affordable 7-passenger SUV in America, CherryHillMitsubishi.com has you covered with the 2025 Mitsubishi Outlander. Take advantage of their 0% for 60 months APR financing for PA residents only, or take home the 2024 Mitsubishi Mirage with payments starting at $55 a week with 0 down retail. Offer not valid with trade-in. Offer subject to credit approval by third party. Not all applicants may qualify. Then you combine that with the best warranty in the automotive business, 10 years, 100,000-mile powertrain, and 5 years, 60,000-mile bumper-to-bumper. Why settle for a lesser warranty and be on the hook for costly repairs down the road? Stop in today, tell them PHLY sent you, and receive a $100 Restaurant.com gift card just for taking a test drive or completing a trade appraisal. I know people buy Mitsubishis elsewhere. I just don't know why. Drive home in your new Mitsubishi today, just minutes from all bridges, or available online 24/7 at CherryHillMitsubishi.com.
Pretty good.
I tried so hard not to say Mitsubishi, but I wanted to.
You were kind of in between. I'd give you an 8 out of 10 on that. Hey, look, but Brenna's here doing it for us, so she's experienced a lot of that with Bill. Okay, let's talk about our friends at Rothman Orthopedics. And guys, we've all been there, trying to power through summer plans with a nagging injury or stubborn pain. But when rest is not cutting it, it is time to call the experts, and that is why we trust Rothman Orthopedics. Like our guy Devon did a few years ago, they got him back upright, and now he is as good as new. He's hooping.
Look, he trusted them before they were giving us money. In fact, he was giving them money, and he trusted them. So that's a pretty good.
What a testimonial that is. So guys, whether you're running on the beach, swinging your golf clubs, or lifting the little ones for a pool day, Rothman specialists are here to treat you for what's holding you back. Their top-tier care will have you moving and enjoying every minute of the summer. And guys, if pain is slowing you down this season, take the first step. Head to rothmanortho.com/PHLY. That's rothmanortho.com/PHLY and schedule your appointment today. Rothman Orthopedics, your summer, your mobility, their mission.
Welcome back to the PHLY Sixers show, brought to you by Rothman Orthopedics. All right, so I think we got through one overrated each in the first 22 minutes of the show. We only have 8 more to go. We should start doing like top 3s just because we talk too much. Not for this show because we prepped and you don't want to throw away prep, but I'm saying in the future we might talk a little too much, so maybe top 3 things.
It's something that happens on a lot of these pods where we do lists. I feel like you just over-index on the ones you're most passionate about, where probably you give 50% to your number one reason, but that's okay. We are professionals, but we can't calibrate this stuff in real time. We can't do it.
No, we've only been doing it for a decade. We'll get it eventually. All right. So what do you got next on your next available overrated reason?
I'm going to go with another game. Not Ben Simmons, but Ben Simmons specifically falling apart in the 2021 playoffs down the stretch. Would they have won that series if he didn't do that? Yeah. But man, that's a low bar. And if we're talking about winning a championship that year, who knows? I mean, Giannis got hurt in the Hawks series. The next series, we have no idea how that would have went. But if the Sixers were playing the full strength Bucks, full strength Suns, that team was not getting it done either too. I know I'm starting with just picking like specific games and those reasons. I actually have kind of more reasons more specific to the teams instead of the games. But yeah, I just thought that 2021 team, the loss to Atlanta was more embarrassing than the missed opportunity that they had. That team just did not have a championship ceiling.
Yeah. So I guess it depends on how you would phrase this. If the Ben Simmons collapse as a whole is listed as a reason, I think that was a pretty big reason, not only because it hurt that playoff run, but you then obviously had that gap year the following year as you tried to sort through the whole Ben nonsense. You get Harden, but you've only got a limited window in the rest of that season. I think that was a pretty big setback. But I think you would have to look at that as the extended Ben Simmons collapse that really happened starting in like February. Like I brought this up before. He was shooting like 67% from the foul line in the first half of the season, and then like 50% in the second half of the season leading up to the playoffs. And then I think he shot like 35% or something from the free throw line in those playoffs. So I think a lot of people over-index on Game 7.
That's
over-index. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Over-index on that play. But based on the way he was trending, even if he makes that play and makes that dunk and maybe gets the foul line and makes that, he is not performing at a championship level for 2 more rounds. He's just so far in his head at that point, there's no way he was going to be able to get through that. And again, I think we too much focus on maybe the first round series against the Nets. Remember when Doc was being asked, like, would you consider taking him out in the final 2 minutes?
Series, and Doc was like,
yeah.
Doc was like, you kidding me?
Yeah. Do you guys watch basketball? It turns out maybe.
Literally did it a week and a half later.
But I think people forget how extended of a collapse that was. And to your point, he was just not keeping that together for another 2 rounds as the stakes got higher and more eyeballs got on him.
To spoil it, Ben's lack of development over the years is an underrated one,
right?
For me. But that's
We're not there yet, Rich.
Well, like, look, I got some people coming at me in the comments, man. I just want to cover my tracks a little bit. Yeah. But my point is that loss to Atlanta was so embarrassing because it was such a low bar. But in terms of winning a championship, that team was going to run into some issues the next
I agree.
Months.
I agree. Both offensively because Ben was turtled up at that point, but also defensively. They just had too many exploitable defenders, especially because you remember Danny Green got hurt in that Game 7. He got hurt, right?
No,
I think it was real early Game 7.
No. In that Danny Green got hurt in Game 6 the next year against Miami. He got hurt in Game 3 against Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
I remember writing, this is one of my worst takes because I just thought Danny Green, I was like, Danny Green is a good player and he's going to hurt them in the next few rounds. That was when we thought the Sixers were capable of beating the Atlanta Hawks. But I didn't think he was going to kill, like his loss was going to kill them in that series because I thought he could be. Basically, his 3-point shooting, you didn't need it. You were going to be able to score against Atlanta at a high level. And really, like, we saw him get torched by Trae Young in the first round as well. I just didn't think his loss was going to be that big of an issue. It was. No, I was wrong about that. Yeah.
And I'd forgotten. I knew he missed 2. He got injured 2 playoff series at the end of 2 years in a row. In the playoffs, the final playoff series, 2 years in a row, he got injured. I guess is the way I was trying to phrase that. I just forgot which game it was against the Hawks. But yeah, I just don't think they were fundamentally built for a deep run. I agree with that. I wouldn't have bet on them to win the championship, even if Ben does the right thing and goes up strong. And a big part of that is Ben's collapse as well. All right, this is going to be my most controversial one, I think.
Oh wow!
Oh, did you have something you want to add?
No.
Okay. Tobias Harris, overrated reason for the Sixers not winning a championship. Now let me explain myself.
Oh, I think it's underrated.
No. Let me explain myself. Tobias's contract and the resources they gave up to get him is a massive reason they were not able to get over the hump.
My underrated reason, Tobias Harris contract and the trade. So, okay, keep going.
Where I place that blame is on the decision makers who invested in Tobias Harris and gave him that contract. So I am saying that the GMs and the front office are the reason that Tobias Harris had that anchor of a contract on the books, that they gave up their last remaining great trade resources. I am blaming that on the people making decisions, not Tobias Harris himself.
So I'm trying to think back to Tobias's playoff career.
Oh, he was awful in the second round every year, pretty much. Yeah.
So why is it overrated then?
It's basically me setting up my take on what's going to be on my underrated reasons, which is a lot of decision makers.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in the Toronto series, the best thing that Toby did, I thought, was that he was able to guard a center in that series.
Yeah, he did it a couple of years, right? He did it against Gasol.
Yeah. And he held up, and the Sixers were able to kind of move some pieces around and put Embiid on Siakam in part because he did that. I mean, I think he shot. Now, look, I'm not going to get on Tobias there are other reasons to get on Tobias. The 2 for 11, I believe, in Game 4, which was the Kawhi stole the game in Philly or whatever. That one hurt. Those were some good looks. But yeah, I mean, the next year, in the bubble, who cares? They didn't have a chance. He was pretty bad in that Atlanta series, though.
I don't want this to be misconstrued. Tobias was awful in the playoffs. He was an anchor around the franchise with his contract. They gave up a ton to get him just to have the right to overpay him. It was and his style of play did not fit. None of those are wrong. I just think we take the venom out on the player, and you should be taking the venom on people who made that decision.
Okay.
Which is sort of like my crux of, sort of like my stance on the show. Now, the one where I'm not going to take that stance on, because like I said, I remember when we were writing about the Tobias trade, and Rich like literally woke me up at like 2 a.m. because this was a super late one. It was like a phone call at like 2 a.m.
3 a.m.
It was ridiculous. It wasn't even a deadline day, right? Like it was a couple days before.
It was a couple days before.
Yeah, like you don't have to announce that at 3 a.m. Come on, guys. Let basketball writers sleep. Anyway, I remember sitting there and like he never felt like a difference maker even at the time. I remember I wrote a column about him, and I think I called him like middling. And one of our editors at the time was like, "Hey, this is pretty harsh. Do you think that you should change the wording?" I'm like, "No, I actually thought I was being too nice. Like he's a fungible middling player, and for them to give up what they gave up just for the right to give him a contract that nobody else in the league was going to give him, it was a gosh darn catastrophe." But I blame the decision makers way more than I blame Tobias.
Traded, I think okay, I'm looking at it now. Wilson Chandler,
yep,
Muscala, and Landry was the big piece at that point.
Yep.
That was the big like current piece. But the issue was the draft capital that they gave up in that trade. Miami's unprotected 2021 first round pick. The Sixers protect. I forget how much they protected that pick. I mean, they were playoff teams, both of those teams in those years. So whatever. It was not great because then you handed him, what was it? 5 years, $180 million.
Yep.
At that point, that was a lot of money.
Gave him $40 million a year to be a $15 million a year player.
Yeah.
Oops.
Okay. So that was an underrated reason for me. I just, and you're right. I'm not blaming Tobias. I think you blame the decision makers on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I think it's mostly that like fans voice a lot of frustration at Tobias, which I understand. You had to watch him for 5 years. And the fact that it's also not just like cap space. It's tradable contracts. Like they didn't have a tradable contract for a long time because they were paying Tobias Harris $40+ million a year.
Would have been a lot easier with a couple $20 million contracts.
100%. And you really did tie yourself to an unmovable contract for 5 years. Like he only played out that contract because you couldn't get any kind of decent value for him. But I just think that this is where my view of the sport and decision makers that acquire the players matter so much more and end up receiving probably a little less of the attention. So
okay.
Right.
Fair enough. So you mentioned head coaches. I had that a little bit lower down the overrated list, but same spot. I only have one more left.
Well, I think this is number 5, so that's good. Yeah.
One more. Backup centers.
Okay. Yeah.
Look, I love railing about the backup centers more than anybody. We talked about the infamous Greg Monroe stat line from Game 7 in Toronto yesterday. 2 minutes. -9, hard to do. I remember in that Toronto series, they were trying Greg Monroe. They were trying Boban, and it was a complete disaster. And they also acquired, now I will say, maybe I'm talking myself out of this. This is why it's lower down the list. They did over-index on getting Al Horford, which was a mistake because of trying to solve the backup center problem, which was an issue. Look, DeAndre Jordan, terrible, all of that stuff. That said, like, as much as I love railing against the backup center problem, it was 5 to 10 minutes a game. There were ways to work around that. And I also think some of the issues with the backup center problem go back to coaching and not being flexible enough with the rotation. So I put that in. That was my last overrated issue. Is it like completely overrated? No, because it certainly has hurt them over the years, but it's something worth mentioning.
No, it's 100% this is a real issue, but it's overrated and overfocused on at time kind of a thing. I agree with that a little bit. I do think there were just so many cell phones throughout the decade. Like you should have known that Montrezl Harrell was.
Oh, it was a problem.
He was washed. You should have known that. You should have known about DeAndre Jordan. You should have known about Greg Monroe. Like these were all preventable mistakes. So I think that's why it gets a lot of attention from me because it should have been preventable and it just wasn't. But I think a lot of those like on-off splits that we talk about, that comes down to just not having good enough depth, not having specifically good enough second and third stars who carry an offense when Joel Embiid is on the bench. You knew you were going to be a poor defensive lineup when someone like Greg Monroe or Montrezl Harrell are out there. You need your stars to help elevate the other end so you can overcome that a little bit. And outside of a brief time with James Harden, the Sixers really just didn't have that. So I agree it was a significant factor. I also agree that it's probably over-indexed, over-focused on a little bit too much.
Look, Ben gets a decent amount of the blame, as you said, because it was really hard to pair him up with the right backup center. They tried to with Al Horford, but they completely ruined the starting five and really just the general construct of the offense in doing so. So Yeah, that worked, but I think that's more of a Ben issue. Aaron in the chat said that this week all of these pods are going to cause him to drink. We're doing future stuff tomorrow, guys. Okay?
Yeah.
Just a couple
and we'll do some NBA focused stuff on Friday. So this is the last of the super depressing ones, all right?
Okay, we're just taking a walk down memory lane for a couple days. Okay?
It's August. Come on. A couple other things I had written down here on overrated reasons for not winning a title during this span. I also had Daryl Morey, in large part, sort of like blaming the ground for causing the Hindenburg disaster. Like, yeah, it was the last event in that chain, but a lot had to go wrong before you got to that point. I blame what went wrong beforehand for making them desperate and for wasting so many resources. The Sixers had so much at their disposal. They never should have gotten to the point where they were desperate. And once Ben requested out, like, Daryl was desperate. They were desperate to try to salvage the second half of Joel Embiid's prime. And when you're in that spot of desperation, I just think you're going to end up making a lot of mistakes. And look, again, Daryl's not blameless. I just think he's over-focused on a little bit. Because, look, once you get past, Ben imploding realistically, once you get past Ben imploding, like, you had one legitimate playoff run that you really could have won something with, right? Because you had the next year when you just acquire Harden at deadline, like, you're not. Like, that's going to be real hard to put together. So you really only had that Boston series. And then obviously this past year, you had so many injuries that it was just not going to happen. And then the previous year, Joel Embiid was pretty much walking on one leg and had a paralyzed face. Yeah. Like, you're really talking about one playoff run against a really good championship caliber team that didn't go your way. It would have been tough to, I think, avoid too much of that. Now, I think the biggest mistakes Daryl has made are extending Joel Embiid and the Paul George contract. But that's not killing your championship equity. That's delaying, extending your rebuild if things don't go right.
Yeah, and if it is killing your championship equity, it's doing it in the future, right? It's not what we're looking at right now. I'll tell you right now, the 22-23 Sixers, Daryl Morey did his job with that team. That roster was good enough to win if Joel Embiid and James Harden got them over the finish line. Couldn't do it. Got close, had a lead with 5-6 minutes left in that game 6 against the Celtics. And it didn't quite happen. But now I thought Daryl Morey did his job that year.
If they had another bench player or two, maybe you don't go to game 7. And you could blame Daryl a little bit for that. You could blame Josh Harris for ducking the tax with the Matisse trade. That was the Matisse trade year, right?
Yes.
So you could blame that. And certainly, you end up relying on players like PJ Tucker, and that didn't necessarily work out. Although it was great in game 7, but if he had been better in games 1 through 6, maybe you don't get to game 7. Again, I don't think he's blameless. I just think he is focused a lot because he sort of inherited the tail end of what has been a frustrating era of Sixers basketball.
Okay.
And then the other one I had written down was Joel Embiid. And I sort of explained my case for that at the top of the show. I just think when you have a flawed team, a team that's honestly not good enough, the star player gets the brunt of the criticism because he is the one that has been, he's the one constant, in large part because the people around him weren't good enough to be constant fixtures of the team. Like, he almost gets dinged for being good enough to build a team around, but it is I fundamentally just don't think a team with Ben Simmons as your second best player and Tobias Harris as your third best player is going to win 4 rounds in the playoffs. I think it's a flawed premise.
That's probably true. I actually have Joel, not himself, but I have some aspects of his game.
Which, again, doesn't mean he is blameless. It just means I think he takes the blunt of the criticism when there were so many things around him that prevented the team from being truly great.
I have him in some of my underrated reasons, not him specifically, but yeah, some aspects about him. It hit me that, man, if you had 23 Joel Embiid on that 2019 team with that roster construction, okay, that team probably wins a title.
And really, not just that, but then if you gave them a second year to come back and run it back, because remember, run it back was a catchphrase, which, for the record, I think both of us were on the side of. If you then had 23 Joel Embiid in 2019-20 and you ran it back with that group and gave them a chance to really build chemistry, you had a chance. Unfortunately, that was not the scenario that played out.
Well, I also wonder too, do you get 21 Embiid without, I almost think he improved because of the abject failure that 19-20 season was. I don't, or maybe it just naturally was going to happen, right? That was his 7th year in the league, but really it was only his 5th year. of playing. So maybe it was just time for him to take that next leap. I don't know, but
yeah. All right. You want to get to a few more of our friends, or do you want to interrupt me one more time with the transition?
No, we can go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. All right, guys, summer is here, which means the kids are out and about, hanging with friends, maybe even picking up a summer job. It's a perfect time to set them up with something that teaches real-world money skills and gives them a little bit of freedom. The Greenlight debit card and money app. If you're a TrueMark financial member, you can get a free Greenlight account for your kids or teens. It's a simple way for them to manage their own money, whether it's from a job, allowance, or birthday cash. They'll get their own debit card, can set savings goals, track spending, and learn how to budget, all while you stay in the loop from your phone. They're still in control, but they get to learn how money really works in everyday life. So before the summer rush kicks in, this is a great way to help your kids build smart money habits that'll stick with them long after the season's over. Head over to truemark.com/greenlight to get all the details and sign up today. Don't miss the chance to set your kids up for financial success. I wonder if they teach them how to duck luxury tax.
You think they have that in the TrueMark Greenlight app?
Maybe.
Well, look.
Guess we'll find out.
I think you just gave them an idea. some free advice. Okay. Empire today, guys, just like your favorite team needs a home court advantage, your home needs a home floor advantage. And Empire today, guys, they are the ones that can help you get it. Empire today has flooring experts, dedicated flooring professionals who focus on flooring every single day. And guys, we've all been to those big box stores. You wander endless aisles, then somehow you're hauling all of those materials home, looking for an installer and coordinating everything yourself. Guys, those big box stores, they can be helpful, but they also, the person who helps you might be working on something else, not just the next day, but really in the next 5 minutes. That's not what Empire does. They are flooring experts. They live and breathe flooring, and they will be with you every step of the way. And their flooring experts bring the showroom right to your home so you can pick the right flooring and the right colors for your space and see how it looks with your furniture. There are no surprises. And with Empire today, you get clear upfront, all-inclusive pricing, plus you can schedule installation as soon as the next day. Nobody likes to wait. So guys, schedule a free in-home estimate today because some things are just better at home. PHLY listeners can receive a $350 discount when using code PHLY. Yes, you heard that right. A $350 discount with code PHLY. Restrictions apply. Visit Empire today/PHLY for full details.
Welcome back to the PHLY Sixers show, brought to you by Rothman Orthopedics. All right, so now we are transitioning. Unless, did you have anyone else on your list that you wanted to get to for overrated reasons why they haven't won?
No, as the negative person I am, I had more underrated reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we are transitioning to the underrated reasons, basically people who deserve more blame for the Sixers' failures over the last decade than they have received. I suppose since you started the underrated, I will start, since you started the overrated, I will start with the underrated. And I don't think anyone's going to be surprised where I go. Although I guess there's probably two strong contenders. But I'm going to start off with Josh Harris. You know, this is a players' league, obviously. And we focus a lot on the players and not have, I just said, I didn't think Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris as your 2 and 3 were good enough to realistically win 4 rounds in the playoffs. Well, then when you say that, you got to go, okay, well, who's acquiring the players? And then when you say that, you go, okay, well, who empowered the person who is making these bad decisions? And we're not going to relitigate everything here because we just had an entire show yesterday where it felt like we were talking about a lot of this era of basketball. But the Sixers wasted so many assets. So many. You mentioned, in terms of inheriting a team, there was almost nobody better positioned inheriting a team than Brian Colangelo was back in 2016. We could go through the list, but you had Joel Embiid, who at that time we didn't even know how good he was going to become, but he would become a perennial MVP contender 3 years in a row, top 2 finishing. You had what would become back-to-back number 1 overall picks in the draft, max cap slots for 2 max players, and the trade chips that would become Jimmy Butler.
You had Covington and Dario.
You had everything you needed to build a powerhouse, and they failed. They failed miserably. Almost legitimately every decision they made during that era did not work out. So you go, okay, well, why isn't Brian Colangelo number one? That's a good question. The reason Brian Colangelo isn't number one is because the process that led to Brian Colangelo freaking sucked. Can we say sucked before overtime? I'm going to say it anyway. It doesn't matter.
Already did.
It was a complete disaster. And it's one thing for you to make a bad hire. It's another thing when the process to get to that point, it seems like you weren't even interested in doing the job search. And again, I'm trying not to go too far off on a tangent because we're 45 minutes into the show and we just talked about all this yesterday. But to go from hiring Jerry Colangelo as an advisor, interviewing 2 candidates, and then hiring his son, and then the son falling flat on his face, you are my number one reason they haven't won a championship during this stretch. You then followed it up with that collaborative front office, which was a disaster. There's just so many mistakes that happened. And yeah, I'd love to sit here and nitpick Elton Brand and Alex Rucker and Brian Colangelo and all kinds of other people behind the scenes, and they deserve a lot of the blame as well. But culture, as Rich said, starts at the top, and they did not set it.
Specifically, 2016 going to Jerry and then not even having a search and just settling on Brian. And then after Brian, after the wife was popping off on Twitter, going with the collaborative front office, which just made bad decision after bad decision, and settling on Daryl after you basically had blown all of your assets.
And by the way, it should also be noted that 2 GMs came in here and couldn't even hire their own coach because you can't even get the order of operations right. Colangelo came in, couldn't hire his own coach because Brett was there and they wanted to keep Brett, which look, I think generally Rich and I are more pro Brett than a lot of people in this chat, but it's weird for a GM to come in and be like, I can't hire my own coach.
100%.
And then you follow it up by hiring Doc Rivers literally months before you hired Daryl Morey. It's like, what are we can't even get the order of operations right. Unbelievable.
So I did have Josh Harris pretty high. I had him at number 2. You mentioned Colangelo. He was number 1.
Okay.
But one other reason.
Colangelo was number 2 for me.
What other reason I had a little lower that I guess ties into the whole Josh Harris part of this. Not enough continuity over the years. Yeah. And that boils down to Josh Harris. They tried way too many things. And some of that was due to the players, right? Some of that was due to Ben Simmons just completely falling apart, and okay, you got to move on from him. But when you look at some of these teams that broke through NBA champions, Jokic and Murray, they had a few swings at this. They had developed a core. Giannis and Chris Middleton, and then Drew Holiday. They had a couple swings at it as well. The Celtics, the last few years, they had failed a bunch of times with a loaded core, and it just felt like the Sixers over those years. All right, we failed this way. Let's
fail another way.
Let's change things around. And I don't know what the right answer would have been, but when you look back on it in retrospect, it would have been nice to have a core that they were able to build with year after year after year. Would have been nice if they ran it back, right? When they had Jimmy Butler, and they let that core develop over the next few years. Now, at the time, that didn't seem like a complete slam dunk because we were a little worried about the next Jimmy contract.
Oh, we're very worried. Yeah,
man, he's 2 contracts later. That was a piece of cake for him. That next contract.
Yeah. That concern was overrated for sure.
Yeah, just not a ton of continuity over the years. Just a lot of new key pieces and not enough time to gel, not enough time to fail together. Yeah, that's all.
All right, do we want to go to the Colangelo of it all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to go too long on this because that was part of yesterday's show, but Colangelo inherited the best situation somebody really has ever inherited. I think the only comparable situation is Sam Presti, and he didn't inherit, I was going to say the S word, but he made that. He figured that out. That was his doing in creating a team in Oklahoma City that is a championship contender, but also has more assets than anybody in the league. It's ridiculous. No, Brian Colangelo, what an unbelievable job he inherited. And those decisions at the beginning in 16, in 17, and through the 18 offseason, he whiffed on enough of them.
It's honestly impressive how every move made during that era didn't work out. Now, look, Ben worked out for a while, and certainly for a long time looked like he was the right decision. But even then, it's impossible to decouple the Jimmy Butler decision with Ben Simmons and with their evaluation of Ben Simmons. And, we've talked about this a bunch. Like, a lot of people want to be like, oh, well, Jimmy didn't want to play for Brett. And look, Brett didn't necessarily love playing for Jimmy, or Brett didn't necessarily love coaching Jimmy, and Jimmy didn't necessarily love playing for Brett. I've talked to both, and I think they would have come back. Regardless, the bigger concern is nobody from Ben Simmons' camp to the team to Jimmy Butler's camp thought Jimmy and Ben were going to be able to, you were going to be able to placate and keep both of them happy long term. So when you talk about the Jimmy, and we just talked about how it would have been great to run him back, give them a couple years to try to build something together, get some chemistry, learn how to play alongside of each other. In order to do that, it depended a lot on your evaluation of Ben Simmons. And I think for the most part, what was Ben, 23 at the time, coming off an All-Star game? Everyone in the league would have picked Ben Simmons over Jimmy Butler. But the Sixers were the one team that had we have we really know what makes this guy tick. We really know what his anxieties are, what his fears are, whether or not he's going to improve on this obvious glaring weakness. And time again, they just were not able to see two steps in front of their nose. And not only did they burn a ton of assets along the way, but they also lost a lot of opportunity costs, whether that was bringing Jimmy Butler back, whether that was trading Ben Simmons at the apex of value. They just did absolutely not only did they burn assets, they did absolutely nothing to engineer any kind of luck and engineer any kind of to prove to us that they had any kind of a true long-term vision. It's honestly, I mentioned during the Josh Harris segment what they inherited and how many different pathways they had to being a great team, and they whiffed on every one.
It was ironic that now Jerry Colangelo was the one who sold himself as Mr. Relationship and the guy, who could really see the what makes people tick and human beings. The two biggest whiffs of the Brian Colangelo era were, like you said, was not realizing that Ben Simmons was not getting any better at basketball. And frankly, they had more information than anybody and maybe getting out ahead of this, but also the Markelle Fultz pick as well. As I talked about yesterday, we were huge proponents of that pick just based on Markelle Fultz's tape at Washington. He was completely nasty, but it was clear that Danny Ainge saw something that he did not like. Now, maybe Danny Ainge was not going to predict the complete downfall of Markelle Fultz, but
no, they were definitely worried about, first of all, some of the people around him and his maturity, for sure.
So that was a background miss.
They point blank did not have Markelle Fultz as a top prospect in that draft, obviously, because they took Jason Tatum.
So that was a background miss, and yeah, yep. So that was an issue. Okay, so those are the top two. Who do you got next? What do you got next?
At this point, hold on, let me scroll back up to my list. At this point, so I had lack of cohesion, but you already touched on that.
Yeah.
In terms of underrated, honestly, and this is gonna be weird, but I kind of think injuries are under discussed a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
I think people.
This is number 3 for me. Joel's injuries in particular. Yeah. People mention them,
but it's almost like I don't want to make an excuse, and he's a choker who can't succeed in the playoffs. And, it's one thing to be like, he's unreliable. And I agree with that. Like, injuries have made him unreliable in the postseason. But I think the actual impact of those injuries and how that impacts his ability to perform at the highest level, and it's not just perform at the highest level, perform at the highest level against the highest level of competition that you're going to play against. And when they have a real chance to game plan, like you being at 60% health or 70% health at that time of year just makes a massive, massive difference. And it's frustrating. I understand, like, being unreliable isn't, like, you're still going to be frustrated about it. But I think the evaluation, and we've mentioned time and time again, we just haven't gotten a chance to see what he looks like healthy in the playoffs. We probably never will, if we're being honest. And that's, to me, more like, I don't get angry at that. It's not Joel Embiid's fault that he's getting injured. Most of these injuries aren't even like, oh, he's out of shape or overweight. It's he got an elbow to the eye socket or a shoulder to the eye socket, or his finger got caught in a jersey, or he landed on a, all right, maybe doing the off the backboard dunk against the Knicks wasn't the smartest thing in the world, but these are just injuries.
What a play, though.
It was an incredible play. I'm always going to wonder whether or not that made that worse, though. But anyway, we don't need to go there.
It absolutely made it worse.
most
terrible decision.
Most of these are things either outside of his control or just happenstance. And, I feel more empathy towards him, and I feel more, I wish we could have seen it, than I do pure anger.
I think there is a tangential element of this, though, was that he was never in the physical fitness that he needed to be. Like the playoffs are so hard to win, guys. Now it's gotten even crazier over the past couple of years as he's gotten older. So, by the way, not a great thing for the Sixers that it's gotten harder as his body has broken down, but it's always been more grueling to play in the playoffs. And he soldiered through it. And like on one hand, I give him a lot of credit for being tough enough to play through injury. Like I remember when he came back from when Siakam elbowed him in the face against Toronto at the end of that series when he was should not have been in the game. They were up 25 points. He had that, and his thumb was hurt as well. He had gotten that caught. Like he came back a week later, and it was dicey. I remember when he played, people were like, I'm not so sure about this. And he helped them get back in that series. Now they ran out of gas. He ran out of gas specifically. Harden couldn't find the ball as well. So on one hand, I want to compliment him for that because I feel like he certainly is tough enough and he really has played through a lot of injury. I just wish he was more proactive about keeping his body in
I agree with that 100%.
So, and that's part of it too. I think that's as much as I want to compliment him about fighting through the adversity. I think he needed to be in better shape.
Well, and that's also why, like, we're talking about, like, I think injuries are an under-discussed portion of why he has failed in the second round. But that doesn't mean that we know he would have succeeded in the second round without those injuries. And part of that comes down to conditioning. Like, I think he looked winded for some of those playoff runs. Now, part of that, like, he might have been under the weather, fighting injuries. The point is, it would have just been great to have a 2 or 3 year stretch of him being healthy so we could actually see what playoff Joel could have looked like in theory. And it would have been great if then you would have had supporting pieces around him that would have fit. Like maybe if you had Harden or Maxey 3 or 4 years earlier. Unfortunately, again, that's not the world we live in. We were running snug pick and rolls. But it just, my point here isn't that he would have succeeded. It's that it would have been great to see that so we could actually get a chance to eval that.
Yeah, I mean, some of those injuries, running into Fultz's shoulder, number one.
Insane.
And Siakam hitting him too. I mean, I think you could probably blame Doc more than anybody on that, but I wasn't as hung up. I mean, that was just such a crazy play. Yeah. I can't get mad at him for that. I can't get mad at him for having Bell's palsy in the foul.
He's broken his orbital bone 3 times in his career. It's insane.
It's crazy. So yeah, and you're right. So that's the initial point that you made that some of the injuries, being unreliable, I think you have to at least put a little bit of that on him, or just accept that that's part of who he is, more than even putting blame on him. But yeah, sometimes we gloss over some of these injuries, and they just had really bad luck. He has been an unlucky player. So I agree with that. That was one of the reasons. My other Joel Embiid reason on the underrated reason that they've struggled, the difficulty of building a playoff offense around a center. Look, Joel Embiid can't help what position he plays. And frankly, he did a great job over his career moving his game to the perimeter because early on in his career, he was, straight post-ups and he realized pretty quick, after 2 years, like, I can't just be a post-up player, guys. Like, the ball's going to get stolen from me. It's hard to pass out of double teams. Frankly, you're allowed to be much more physical on the low block than on the outside. So credit to him for developing that face-up game and becoming that MVP level player. But man, it's just hard to get him the ball. Even as he became a better perimeter player, it's much easier to just give the ball to Jason Tatum and say, just dribble the ball up the floor. And you can run your offense that way.
Take one dribble to the left, take a step back 3. Like you can do that time and time again.
And if you look over the years, they have defended well enough to move on in the playoffs. Their half-court offense has let them down for a lot of reasons. Ben Simmons was on the roster for a lot of these years. He is a major reason. Joel with the injuries.
Spoiling my 5th underrated here.
Well, I mean, we're 58 minutes in. I think we've probably already touched on it a few times. But yeah, I just think it's hard to build an offense around a center. It's hard.
We do want to, because I want to get this out of the way before we truly get started here on our next topic, because I honestly don't know how long this next topic is going to go for. This will be our last underrated reason. It is something we have talked about a little bit, but it's also something that a lot of fans have some very, very, very strong opinions on that. But before we get to that spot, because, like I said, we are about to start our next topic. If you are watching us on TV, one of those fast channels, head on over to allphly.com so you can continue the conversation. My fifth reason was Ben Simmons. Now, this is a little bit contradictory to what I said earlier about Tobias, where I didn't blame Tobias Harris for not being good enough or for his contract. I blame the people who acquired Tobias Harris and the people who gave him that contract. The reason I am including Ben Simmons here is because how he actively avoided working on the one thing that they really needed him to work on and to get better at the one thing that the game today truly relies upon. And the one story that I've said on this before is how the Sixers sent an assistant coach to Australia for like a 3-week get together with Ben to work on his shooting, and he ghosted him.
Who was that? John Townsend?
I'd have to go back through my notes. I would have to go back through my notes.
It's a long flight to Australia.
It's a long flight, and he went out there and he avoided him, and eventually the coach had to come back. Look, I think I'm probably a little more sympathetic to Ben than some people. Like, I think there was a fear of failure there that he just never could get beyond. But you are a professional basketball player. You have to embrace the resources you need to embrace to get you to that next phase and to get you to where you are comfortable shooting. It is to sit here and have tied, because there's, like I mentioned, I didn't blame Daryl Morey as much as some people, because, like I said, the analogy I used was, it's like blaming the ground for the Hindenburg. There was so much stuff that happened beforehand. It was not like, it would have been real tough to dig yourself out of that hole. The reason you got in that hole, the reason you could have, or the way you could have avoided getting in that hole, was for one of these draft picks, these high draft picks, these literal number 1 draft picks to work out. And I don't really blame Markelle all that much, in part because, Markelle he never really succeeded at an NBA level in that regard, in part because what happened is just so weird and unique and a little bit unexplained. But Ben was there. He was an all NBA caliber player. He's an all defensive caliber player. He was the running mate that you had a chance, because Ben was drafted, Ben was drafted when Joel Embiid made his debut, but he had to wait a year because he got his foot injured, because that's a rite of passage here in Philadelphia. But they pretty much mirrored each other in terms of when they played. They put themselves on the map right away. Because they put themselves on the map, I think the Colangelo front office tried to hit the accelerator maybe a little bit too early. But if you wanted to have a clean dynasty, a real chance of building something sustainable, Ben had to work out and he had to get better. And instead of that, he let his fears overtake him. He eventually got to the point where he's barely a role player in the league. Now, obviously, injuries have played a large part in that as well. You spent so much time during the Joel Embiid's physical prime having to overcome for the biggest deficiency in the league and trying to build a roster around somebody who just fundamentally would not shoot outside of 5 feet, that I think it highlighted, like you were just talking about how in the playoffs, half-court offense was always a problem. Well, the point guard who can't shoot, pretty big part of that problem.
Do you remember all those years when people would try and tell you, he doesn't need a jump shot?
Oh, and look, I felt like I tried to explain both perspectives, because it's like, on the one hand, he is legitimately world-class at a bunch of things that he does. Like, one of the most versatile defenders in the world, one of the best transition pushers in the world, great court vision, yada, yada, yada. And I was really impressed with the way he bought in defensively, because quite frankly, at LSU, he just didn't care. But you can say all of that while not denying the fact that his complete refusal to even attempt a jump shot outside of 5 feet, and quite frankly, even beyond that, just his refusal to attack the rim because he was afraid to go to the basket in the latter year or two of his career, were massive. And it's just, those are really tough. Like, once you get, and I feel like the NBA is getting better and better at using players' weaknesses to their advantage defensively and with their schemes. But once you get to playoffs, you can't hide that. Like, Brad Stevens is too good of a game planner for you to hide against that. Like, it's going to come back and bite you.
If you put the ball in his hands, which is what he was earlier in his career, Brett put the ball in his hands. And again, he was very good in the regular season. He found a lot of teams where he could push the ball in transition and throw down dunks. Like, he was a unique, versatile player. If you put the ball in his hands against a half-court defense that is scouted for you in the playoffs, he doesn't need a jump shot. What? And then if you play him off the ball, there's one spot to put him, and it was in that stupid dunker spot.
Yep.
Doesn't work, man. No. It just doesn't work.
Well, and he wanted the ball too. Like, again, we talked about the big reason Jimmy's not here. The primary reason Jimmy wasn't here longer, Ben wanted the ball. If Ben has the ball, then Jimmy can't have the ball.
There's two parts of Ben's career, because clearly he broke down both mentally and also a little bit physically. He's not the same athlete as well. But let's say those first 4 seasons, 4 seasons, and then at the end of that 4th season was the pass, capital T, capital P, to Matisse Thybulle. Like what player has his best season in his rookie year? Now, you might argue that his 3rd season was actually better. He was pretty good on that terrible that offensive calamity of that 2019-20 year. I believe he made 3rd team All-NBA and got a little extra money on that contract because of it that season. But like the fact that he was paired up with Tyrese Maxey because of the clutch pairing earlier in their career, could there be too many different people? Like Tyrese Maxey just gets better and better and better and better. Now he'll probably stop getting better at some point here because he's gotten to be an all-star level player, and there's only so much better Tyrese Maxey can get. The lack of improvement from Ben Simmons over those first few years is just maddening, man. It's just maddening. And it was a guy who was so comfortable where he was at, and frankly, so afraid to get outside of his comfort zone. Part of the reason, he was the one who started the whole PR campaign for I'm the defensive player of the year in 2021. And it's like, man, you buying in on defense is great. That is awesome. But you know why you're doing that? Because you're not getting better anywhere else. And the fact of the matter was, if he got better at shooting a basketball and he actually worked at that, that is what would have unlocked him to become, maybe an all-time great player, but he never even tried.
Very, very, very frustrating because it showed so much promise. Like the moment he stepped on the floor, they were a world-class defense. And they were that way for pretty much right up through the Atlanta series. The two of them anchored what could have been one of the most versatile, dominant defenses in the league for an extended stretch. They just needed him to develop. And he, like, legitimately, if you go back and you watch him in high school, he was a more willing shooter. He took a step back on his willingness to shoot almost every year from high school through where he is today. And obviously the stage got bigger. Obviously more people started focusing on that deficiency. And the one thing I never really get to is I don't think he didn't care about basketball. I think a lot of people say that, but I don't see people commit defensively like he did if they don't care about basketball. I don't see people keep themselves in that kind of shape if they don't care about basketball. I much more think it is and you're going to disagree, and that's fine. I much more think there was a mental component that he just wasn't able to push past. And it sucks. They really needed to find a way to figure that out. And I don't think they really had championship equity until they did. Not at least until Tyrese Maxey burst on the scene and James Harden was acquired. But at that point, you're talking about realistically one playoff run that they were actually healthy for. And that's why that Boston series stings.
He did play his butt off. I will agree with you there. And he was the opposite of Joel. He was always in great shape, and he was always willing to play, 44, 45 minutes. Frankly, the Kawhi series, Kawhi was making all those jumpers on him. I thought Ben defended him really well.
Really good. Yep.
Yeah. So totally committed in that way. But there is an element of basketball where you got to be committed to your craft. You got to be willing to work on your weaknesses. You got to put in that sweat equity on the things that you struggle at, and, tinker and try and get better with your trainers in the off season. He didn't do any of that.
Yep.
Or if he did it, he was just going through the motions.
You have anything else on your list that we didn't get to?
No, you mentioned earlier, the Tobias Harris contract and the trade, but we mentioned that earlier, and you're right.
Debated a little bit.
I liked how you framed that. That's more being mad at the people who acquired him and signed him to that contract. Terrell Harris, very good agent.
We did have a super chat come in from Riaz a little bit earlier. Are the Sixers going to sign a power forward who can crash the boards at all? If not, will Drummond see more minutes at the 5 without Joel in the mix? I would guess the only move left, they have 13 players on the roster after waiving Ricky. I would guess the only move left is Quentin Grimes, signing him. Will there be maybe an Exhibit 10 contract or two handed out? Maybe, but I don't think I see any moves happening between now and, let's say, when the trade window opens back up in December. In terms of Drummond, I hope not. I hope we don't see too many minutes of Drummond. Adem Bone is just a fundamentally better basketball player. Now, clearly, when Embiid is out, you're going to have to get a little bit creative, and you might see more of Drummond. I hope Andre Drummond is a trade chip and little else. Even his rebounding last year was way below where it was in previous years.
It's a little bit of a bummer that Chris Boucher signed in Boston.
Mm-hmm. On basically a minimum.
For a minimum, right? Basically. Now, what was that? $3.3 million, I think I saw. He's an older player than you think. He entered the league when he was an older player. Now, for the Sixers, would that have screwed with their ability to re-sign Grimes?
No, and that because I'm pretty sure that is a minimum, so you wouldn't have had to tap into your taxpayer MLE, so you wouldn't be hard capped. I'm pretty sure. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that was an actual minimum contract.
Damn, would have been nice to have him.
Yeah. Even still, I don't think he's necessarily fixing anything per se. I think Daryl's main philosophy now is like preserve flexibility and then plug any holes at the deadline if holes need to be plugged. And holes needing to be plugged doesn't just mean they have a weakness on a team. It means the team is good enough that you are actively trying to improve it, which I think we saw last year. Like people are a lot of like, well, why didn't KJ, basically trade exception materialize? In part because they weren't buyers at the deadline. They shouldn't have been buyers at the deadline. So we will see how that plays out. But I would expect Daryl will go in there, like I said, trying to preserve trade flexibility, which in part means not using that taxpayer MLE and plugging holes in season.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I'm concerned about the rebounding. I'm not saying that Riaz's concern is wrong. I just don't think they're going to address it in the offseason.
I love Riaz. Great commenter. I don't hope to see Drum play at all this season. Yeah. I really hope to not see him play at the 4. That's all.
Yeah. And quite frankly, I don't want to see him play at the 5. 100%. Any other stray thoughts you have before we get out of here? Or do you want to hit that world famous roll call?
I think we should hit the world famous roll call.
There we go. All right. Let me see if I have my list of names up here. We will start off with Winona, who has been here pretty much every day this week. So appreciate
Shout out to Nona.
Antoine D Flyers. D1EHL, which I really don't know what that would have been before YouTube screwed us up with these names.
We got to get the normal names
I
back.
Can't stand this. I really have no idea why they keep doing this to us. Sixers Babe 07, which I believe is Jess with the purple heart. Aaron Greeny Green, Neil Deaver, Doing Sigs, SB Cole, Jack Reacher, Mac2 Mon, who really wanted to blame Embiid, noting he was the one constant. As I said at the top of the show, I do largely think that is because Embiid is taking the brunt because he was the only one good enough to be here for a decade, which speaks a lot to the organizational mismanagement of Josh Harris and company. Jack Reacher, SB Cole, which I think I mentioned both of them already, actually. Mr. Sandman, NYAL, Eugene Ross, Al Faded.
That's Theo.
Theo. Okay, thank you. See, this maybe you should be doing this because you actually remember these guys' names.
I'm pretty good with the avatars. Doing Sigs is Joaquin too.
Reggie Allen. Let's see. Riaz with the super chat, of course. Nah, it's a bunch of people repeating themselves. That's all that I have on the list. Scrolling up to see if I missed anyone, but thank you all for joining us once again today. We'll be back tomorrow at that 3 p.m. time. As always, if you can, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notifications when we go live. And of course, hit that thumbs up to thank Rich for all of his hard work for coming in here and for all the producers we had to swoop by as Bree is on vacation. They have all done a terrific job. Thank you again, Brenna, and everyone else who has helped out. We will see you tomorrow.
We all silly like the mayor.